Said before we begin, please note that the views, opinions, and information shared during this presentation are those of the presenters and do not necessarily reflect the views of Anne Arundel County Association of Realtors. AACAR has not reviewed, edited, verified, or approved the content of this program, and it is not responsible for the accuracy or completeness of the information presented. Please use your own personal judgment and consult appropriate advisors when needed. Okay, with that said, Greg, will you
Yes,
share with us? Because I'm actually very anxious to hear this about
sure.
legislative updates.
Yeah, so we'll cover everything. I will kind of do soup to nuts here. We'll start with the local level, the county council, county executive. I'll talk a little bit about the state and then touch briefly on some of the federal issues as well. So thanks, Mel. Hey, Pam, how are you?
Fine. How about you?
Good. So actually yesterday, the timing's great. So we're, midterm elections, obviously this year, we have a lot going on, county council primaries and the general elections in November. Same thing with county executive. But yesterday we had our candidate interviews, candidate forum for county executive. So we had, right now we've got James Kitchen, Allison Pickert, Kyle Nemhard, Pete Smith, all running on the Democratic side, and then Dave Caldwell's running for the Republican nomination for county executive. So, the board of directors will vote based on some of the recommendations from that committee on who to endorse for the upcoming candidacy. So I think we're tracking, and we probably have that announcement here shortly on county executive. I will say that the county executives and a couple of them that we spoke with were certainly tuned into some of the housing issues that we're facing locally and a lot of the advocacy issues that we're pushing for. So it was really good to hear that. And we've got some definite allies in that space as well. Hopefully things go as planned. And then of course we have there's 7 districts in Anne Arundel County for the county council, and those seats are up for election as well. So we have that. They're getting ready to go into their budget meetings. That typically happens in June. I think June 15th is the final meeting, but they'll have 3 budget proposal meetings leading up to that. So we're kind of on standby, waiting to see what happens with the budget issues. Advocacy and legislative adjacent. There's 2 things. I know I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but Congresswoman Elthroth is working on, if you're familiar with Trade Point Atlantic, where they did the revitalization where Bethlehem Steel was, they're working on a similar project near the Coast Guard yards on the border of Anne Arundel County and Baltimore City on our side, down past Curtis Bay, a similar project, which will bring a lot of jobs to the area. And we know where the jobs go, clients follow. So we're very excited about that. And they're revamping the Coast Guard yard as well. I didn't realize this, but I think the Coast Guard yard does the majority of all the repairs for the Coast Guard. So a pretty integral institution and installation there for us as well. So that again will help jobs. And they were talking a lot yesterday about transit-oriented redevelopment, smart growth, the things that are happening in the county that we're going to try to educate the constituency on and the population is a lot of these redevelopment infill type smart growth projects will actually help some of the traffic issues and actually long term would be good for the environment. So that's sort of the narrative that we're trying to overcome. As soon as somebody hears development or density or higher density, everyone gets pretty panicky about traffic issues and the like. But we've had a couple of traffic studies that were associated with some of the bills that showed that the new development will actually improve some of the traffic flows and patterns. So hopefully moving forward, we enter into more private-public partnerships that will help with some of the infrastructure development, because we know that needs to go hand in glove with some of these development and increased housing initiatives. So
Is it public transportation, Greg, or that's improving it or not, or hoping to improve it?
Overall, they have to increase the public transportation, the infrastructure around all of that. But especially like I know, like Allison Pickert, who's running for county exec. She has a lot of transit-oriented public redevelopment zones in mind for some of the bills that we're talking about. So it would just increase like higher density around some of the public transport
Okay.
hubs that we have. So I think it'll
Makes
be, yeah, overall good thing for us. And again, it's all about smart growth and making sure that the infrastructure capacity keeps up with it. But we know that we need more inventory. So a lot of these bills, and we'll talk about on the state level and then on the federal level as well, but a lot of it's geared towards kind of increasing, I think. I have to double check here. Let me see if I can pull it up real quick. Maryland Realtors has a great site on their advocacy page. So does NAR as well. But
Okay. That's Maryland Realtors Advocacy.
yeah, and that, let me see if I can pull that up for you.
Okay, so that sounds like a great resource.
Yeah, mdrealtor.org/advocacy priorities. If you go to that,
Wow.
they've got
Okay.
a phenomenal updates on where we're at. They do a pre-session video and they have a YouTube channel as well with some of the advocacy updates. Lisa May did an update for us this week. So that's great. It's always a great resource there to track it. But they also have some of the housing information on there. They always have our housing survey infographic that they do for the public at large, which is great. We use those when we do lobby day talking points at the General Assembly when we have that in February. So it's always a big help to us, and they do a great job there as well. So
Great.
yeah, that's a great resource to check out. And then we're something like, I want to say 400,000 units short by 2040, 2035, or 2040 here in Maryland. So obviously we have a lot of work to do to keep up inventory wise.
And that's across the entire state.
Yeah, across the entire state. Yep. So switching gears a little bit and talking about some of the state legislation, there were some great bills that were passed. There were some bills, unfortunately, that weren't passed. The earnest money, I guess, Senate Bill 691 was the termination of residential real estate contracts and earnest money deposit. If you recall, last year before last, or last year, we passed an expedited process to get the earnest money deposit back for certain contract contingencies. Financing was left out of that for some reason, but now we've wrapped that back into it. So the financing contingency is now part of that expedited earnest money deposit release. That will be effective October 1st, 2026.
So soon. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. And it also requires the seller to file a notarized mediation request within 10 days of receiving the purchaser's request on termination. So, and the holder of the trust money now must return it within 5 days. I believe it was 30 days prior to. So the whole process has been tightened up, which is great for our clients and the consumer at large, for sure. A lot of those EMDs were kind of held hostage there for a while, and people were kind of taking advantage of some of the loopholes in there. Another one that the state was able to pass was the homeowner service agreements. That's where they tied these in and did deed recordings for, and probably a lot was being taken advantage of the elderly, that they recorded if they ever went to resell their home, they had to use a particular company. And that was tied into on the land records. And we did have that law was changed. However, if there was effective agreements in place already, there was no way to kind of retroactively go after those. So what this bill did, Senate Bill 814, I think, went in and retroactively made all of those agreements no longer valid or void. So that's great. I think there was like 1,000 properties in Maryland that had these service provider agreements attached to them. So
I've never run into that. Did you ever run into it yourself?
no, you see them a lot. Like I think more in Baltimore City and some, yeah. But I have not personally run into them, but apparently they're out there, and there was quite a bit more than I had realized.
Wow. Okay.
couple of the other ones, let's see here. What are we talking about?
Before you get, Jody, you were shaking your head. Had you ever run into that?
No, I'd never heard of it, but I was laughing because it would be Baltimore City that would have something like that.
Having been taken
But yeah,
advantage
I'd never heard of that.
Yeah. Um, so we also, there's a new flood disclosure coming. I know we all love when we have to do additional disclosures.
of?
So there'll
Yay.
be a new mandatory flood disclosure that will be required. That goes into effect July 1st, 2027. So we have some time on training on that.
A new flood disclosure. Do we know what it entails or tightens?
You just have to, you're going to have to verify, kind of like with the new super fund
Oh, yeah. I was
act.
going to ask you about that.
Yeah, so there's gonna be two websites. I think there's two websites you can go to
Okay.
determine if the property's in a flood zone. I mean, before, I think the best practice was reach out to your preferred insurance provider, ask him if, there was a flood cert needed or what that was. Now we're actually the onus is gonna be on the agent to do the due diligence and the disclosure up front.
And
We,
you said July 1 to start
yeah,
training people.
yeah, July 1 of next year. So we got plenty of time to kind of
Mhm.
prepare for that. Um, and on that note too, we've been talking on Maryland Realtors for getting a sort of one-stop shop website in place. This would be something oddly enough that I think the Department of Natural Resources may help facilitate with, but it'll be sort of one place where we can check on like the Superfund
That's
sites,
fabulous.
the flood, so it will be less convoluted and more of a
Mhm.
one-stop shop for all that. So fingers crossed on
Oh, I
that.
like that idea a lot. And what
Yeah.
has to happen? Who has to agree? This
Um,
the state?
yeah, the state, for sure, the state. And then they have to find the appropriate agency that would be willing to undertake that, which is a challenge in and of
Mhm.
itself. And then given my opinion, given our current budgetary
Mhm.
concerns and constraints, that's a whole other animal that they'd have to fund it somehow. So that money would have to come from somewhere. Hopefully they don't impose some other hidden housing tax or something to pay for it.
You might have already described how they're going to pay for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
We did the Bambi Act. I don't know if you guys were familiar with or heard it called the Bambi Act.
Mhm.
That was defeated, which was great. I know Lisa May did some good work on that up front beforehand. That was a legis, you know, thinly veiled disguised legislation that was being proposed as like pro housing benefit was actually very bad for across the board on a number of different reasons. But that was defeated prior to it even kind of going to the floor. It had a provision in there to cap real estate commissions. So if you ever wonder where your RPAC money or where your association fees go on the advocacy team, MACO, the Maryland Association of Counties, had proposed, they felt like one of the obstacles or hindrances to housing unaffordability were real estate commissions. So they had proposed a 4% cap on total real estate commissions for a transaction, which is crazy. So that provision was taken out of the bill prior to it even sort of making to the floor any votes or in committee, I should say. So that was, there's your advocacy dollars at work for us trying to protect us on that. But that bill was shot down. Middle housing options did not pass, so we're still working on it. There's a couple bills that didn't pass. The zoning limit, the Starter and Silver Homes Act, which was one that we were obviously really pushing hard for. That would have prohibited local governments from requiring larger lot sizes, minimum home sizes, and stuff like that. So, sort of your tiny homes or cottage cluster type homes for senior citizens. That did not pass. So that I'm sure will be back on the docket again next year. Again, the building affordability in my backyard, the Bambi bill did not pass. The big one that didn't pass, in my opinion, and I'm sure everyone will be in agreement on this, is the Condominiums and Homeowners Association resale bill, House Bill 1132. That would have consolidated the timeframes on HOA and condo requirements It would have also limited base fees from 250 to 100 dollars and really reined in what they do and how they charge for expedited resale packages. That made it through both the delegate body, the Senate, the committees, all three of the floor discussions, and it was on the docket for the last day of sine die and just didn't make the vote. So we were like super, super close to getting that passed. And of course, that'll be reintroduced next year. And fingers crossed that it takes a little bit higher priority and gets passed next year. What else did we have in there?
I don't remember a decade or two ago, HOA and condo fees, and the process of getting the docs being as complicated as it is now.
Yeah,
And
I think
is taking as long as it does now.
yeah, right. I think it's just turned into such a the property management companies have monetized it to a point where it's just such an integral part of their
Jody's laughing again, yes.
revenue that yeah, it's crazy.
I would use the
Anecdotally,
word racket.
yeah,
The
it
R
totally
word is
is.
not revenue, it's racket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anecdotally, I had one last week where, um, early on, the homeowner had ordered the package. They told him it would be like 30 days or something crazy. It was like a crazy number, which was not realistic at all. But then they said, well, you can expedite it for $450 and
Yeah.
get it in 14 days or something to that effect, which is just, yeah, it's a racket.
Jody had the right word, the right
Yeah.
R word.
Yeah. Just, I mean, it's the same process.
Being held hostage. I remember
It's,
when you could go pick it up.
right. Yeah.
Hey, I'll be there tomorrow. And you
Yep.
could pick it up.
Well, and now it's all these fees, and all they have to do is push a button.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. It's gotten much easier on their part. They don't have to print anything, do anything, and then they've jacked up the fees. So um, there was some squatter, I would say, lease holdover tenancy good cause requirements that did not pass. Rent fee restrictions, which did not pass. There was one other one. And again, I'll share with Lisa Hamilton an update too, as well, that she can share with our membership. Yeah.
I have the slides from Lisa May the other day doing the 2026 wrap-up session.
Yeah.
Did you see that? Were you on there? Did you see that?
I wasn't on that one. They did another one that I was on for. I don't know if it wasn't for the executive committee. I'm trying to figure out who it was
Yeah,
for, but
and it basically was the same presentation. So I was probably on the first one, but I also listened to the second, which was,
okay.
you know,
Yep.
was
Yeah. So, we did, there's over just so that the membership knows, it's roughly about like 2,000 pieces of legislation that's introduced during that 90-day session for the General Assembly. It's a lot. And then obviously, a good majority of those are either affecting, influencing housing or our industry in general. So for everyone out there who volunteers to be part of like the state legislative committee and even the local legislative committee, but the state legislative committees, really, they do a pretty heavy lift, those first couple of months. So I think the session starts the second Monday of January, last 90 days until sine die. But a lot of work goes into reviewing those bills from both the local boards of realtors all the way up to obviously the state legislative committee and then the advocacy team. They're down there testifying on a lot of those. And they were down there testifying on the Bambi Act for quite a bit. And then we're pretty instrumental in passing the two bills that I mentioned as well. So a lot of work goes on behind the scenes. I don't know that the membership always knows about, but I would make it part of your marketing, your talking points when you're talking to consumers out there and your clients. Let them know that this isn't just. It's not just for our benefit, it's for homeowners' benefits, right? We're out there. There is no National Association of Homeowners. We're it. And we're out there protecting real property rights. We're protecting housing affordability opportunities, access to affordable housing, fair housing rights. So, we're sort of that last line of defense for homeowners out there, and I would make sure that all your clients and consumers know it.
And Greg, that is such an amazing perspective that I don't think agents use and market with, which is that we are truly their advocates.
Right.
I think it would be really good if you did a talk just on that at some point, on
Yeah.
advocacy, agents advocacy for clients.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
We are that National Homeowners Association, so to speak, where we're out there protecting, their real property rights. And again, gaining access. We're fighting hard every day for housing affordability and greater access to more homes. And we'll talk a little bit on the national level and what we're doing there. Everyone seems to be in lockstep. And there is an issue. I know when we were speaking with one of the county executives yesterday, and I'll have to reel back in how I talk about like NIMBYism, not in my backyard kind of thing. And we fight that. It's a prevailing sentiment. Again, when anyone talks about higher density, growth, development, you get a lot of pushback for obvious reasons, traffic and environmental concerns. And there are some legitimate concerns around that. But it's our job as realtors to not only, to your point, Mel, we're out there, we're working with them on the front lines of, making sure that we can get them in their home of choice or sell their home, but we're advocating for them, and for those homeownership opportunities and for the legislation that's going to help improve our state. The state of Maryland, approximately 60% of revenue is generated through real estate transactions. That's a lot. So the majority of the revenue that comes into the state is generated through real estate.
I had no idea it was that high. 60%?
Yeah, 60%.
Wow.
So, we've been in a housing recession probably for about 4 years now. We've been bobbing at the bottom, coming out of the frenetic COVID markets.
Right.
But 4 years, we see it on the state level. The state has a provision where they have to have a balanced budget. They have a balanced budget statutory requirement, so they have to balance the budget. And we're a huge budget shortfall. The last couple of years, we went from I want to say it was like a $5 billion surplus to a $3 billion deficit. And when we're not selling homes, all that we don't have that money coming into the state. So then we get on the slippery slope where in order to make up, because we have to have a balanced budget, in order to make up those revenue deficits, a tax has to come from somewhere or something. So if we can increase our housing sales, obviously through inventory, and now we're fighting the fight on rates, and we know we can't control those black swan events like what's going on in the Iran. But if we just tipped our toes into the 5% pool for like a day, and then the Iran war happened, and now we're back up in mid sixes. So it is what it is, but we'll get there. I think we're tracking in the right direction. And I guess my long-winded point to all that is that behind the scenes, and to your point, Mel, the membership doesn't talk about it enough. We have advocacy teams both on the county level. Max Gross does an amazing job as our GAD, Government Affairs Director. Bob's obviously very involved with that, our CEO. And then on the state level, Lisa May, Krista McGee, and that whole team, advocacy-wise, is top-notch. Probably one of the best, in my opinion, in the country. And then what we're doing, what NAR does, the Realtor Party, on the federal level with not only their advocacy wing, the lobbyists at NAR, but the FPCs, federal political coordinators, putting in a lot of work to make sure that we keep things within the guide rails, and moving forward for us. And it's not always easy, especially when there's budgetary issues locally. And I'll butcher it, so I won't use the French term for it, but there's a provision called, I think it's called foot on the ground. The rough translation of it is foot on the ground. And they were talking about potentially imposing another tax. We had the luxury tax that came on probably 3 years ago for properties that sold for over $1 million. We were kind of blindsided by that. So now they're thinking about proposing a tax that would, if you had a second home, it would be like a luxury tax on your second home. So we'll obviously oppose that as well. Yeah. So transitioning into federal.
Before we transition,
Yeah.
could I ask you about ADUs?
Yeah.
Were they discussed?
Yes, I think we're tracking. The ADU legislation, especially locally and statewide, did pass. So that was one of our um, benefits. That I guess the one that we did the starter and silver homes bill did not pass.
Right. I
If that's
noted
what you're,
that.
yeah. So that one we're going to obviously tee up again for next year. But that's really essential, especially for like cottage cluster developments for ground level senior living and even first time home buyers for sure. Um,
In European countries, I read that they do condominium buildings, and then, but you're required to have different age groups. So you have to have the 20 somethings, you have to have the, middle, and then you have to have the elderly all in the building together.
yeah, you were
They,
telling me about that. That's
I've
cool.
told you about that, right? I don't know, Jody, if you've ever heard, or Pam. And then there's a communal living space and kitchen. And once a week, somebody in the building volunteers to cook for anyone else in the building that wants to come. So it forces all well, I don't know if force is the right word, but it makes it very easy for generations to stay connected, which I think is beautiful.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really cool concept. I would like it would be kind of interesting to see it, put into practice here and see how it does.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Can I get the question? I may have missed it. Greg, the tenants bill, the good cause or the
Yeah,
statewide or the family daycare and rentals. I mean, they didn't pass; they were defeated. But
right.
those were three bills that were really
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. And that's the kind of thing that it's always great when you see a bill that passes and it's something that we're fighting for. But if you see a bill that like the Bambi bill, for instance, that didn't pass, and most realtors, most members of the association probably will never know about it. But the work that went into making sure that it didn't pass, and when we're opposing that on the local legislative or the state legislative committees and opposing it, and we opposed that one, I think, a level 5. So that meant we went down and testified in front of the General Assembly about it. So that's the kind of work. Sometimes it goes unnoticed, but it's super impactful for us. It's a lot of times it's about the bills that don't pass as much as it is about the ones that do pass.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I interrupted you. You were about to go national, I think.
Yeah, no worries. And then I guess also locally on the state side of things, there was a septic inspections for rental properties that did not pass, which would have required a mandatory septic inspection and pump out for tenants and purchasers of new septic properties. So that was opposed and it did not pass this session as well. So that was good. Yeah, so on the federal level, most of Anne Arundel County is in District 3, all of Howard County, and a little bit of Carroll County. So Congresswoman Elfreth is our representative in Congress for District 3. And recently we had a function with the Congresswoman there. But I guess more importantly, through our efforts and through some of the advocacy work we're doing, she let us know that she co-sponsored HR 3526, that's Uplifting First-Time Homebuyers Act, which would allow utilizations from IRAs to be increased, the amount of money that could be pulled out of that, or giving opportunity or access for money for down payments. HR 1340, that's the More Homes on the Market Act, which you guys may know about. That's the one where we're trying to get the capital gains exclusion increased from 250 for a single, 500,000 for a married couple. We're going to try and double that to 500,000 and $1 million. That bill went into law in 1997, I believe, under Bill Clinton, and hasn't changed. So for almost 30 years, those figures have remained the same. So in essence, really the tax relief and benefits, been cut in half because of inflation. So we're trying to get that doubled, and then also maybe tie that into like a consumer price indexing or some sort of index moving forward, so we don't have to revisit that in the future. And then she also co-sponsored Revitalizing Downtowns and Main Streets Act, which was a great housing initiative for NAR on the national level. So it was great. I think we talked on the teaser for this, Mel. We talked about having a seat at the table or having a voice. That's a prime example of our ability to have a voice, have a little bit of influence in the things that we do over time, matter. So really our representative, going back to John Sarbanes, we haven't had housing advocates congressionally around here the way we should have, but now certainly more and more they're listening to us. We're having dialogue and conversations with them, so it's been a huge benefit to have that relationship as well. So that was great. Yeah. So those are the three big co-sponsor bills. There's also a real estate caucus, which is a bipartisan caucus within Congress. We're trying to get Congresswoman Elfreth involved with, and I think we're making inroads there as well. So the more we can have the conversation on a national level, certainly at the state level, about advocacy towards housing issues, inventory, home ownership opportunities, it's going to be better for us, right? That's where we're trying to protect our industry, and again, looking out for like the clients and the consumers out there. But that's kind of the whole, soup to nuts from the local level, state level, and the federal level. Again, we're tracking. If I had to pinpoint our biggest area of concern, I think it would be within the Maryland General Assembly. We still seem to, run into some major obstacles there when it comes to some housing related initiatives, legislation, and bills that we want to sponsor. And again, some of that is some of the NIMBYism that we talked about. But it is what it is. And I think we're making, we're continuing to make inroads there as well. We just have to be careful and guard against, we talked about, when we're in these budget downfalls, a lot of times housing, real property and real estate becomes an easy target, a low-lying fruit for some of these legislators to think they can come in. And we know, like raising transfer and recordation taxes and that kind of thing, the luxury tax that were put on properties, that was put on properties over $1 million, but it also had negative consequences because it affects commercial transactions as well. And I know Bob we were talking to one of the candidates yesterday, and like a $4 million commercial deal in our county now, because of that added luxury tax, it increases the transfer costs on that property by $250,000. So it's a huge amount. And that number, a lot of times, I guess what the politicians don't always see is, that's $250,000 of extra revenue they see, but it could also prevent a deal from being done in our county. And, that impediment, and that's the reason we fight hard against, additional taxes a lot of times, is because it's an impediment for businesses moving in and conducting business. Same thing of like the unaffordability of the homes, whether it's renting or owning in our areas, caused a lot of younger people to move out of state. We're seeing a lot of people move to some of the southern states, South Carolinas,
And
and
it's not just the young people, Greg. I mean,
right.
I'm at the age now where I'm talking to a lot of people who are retiring, and
Yeah.
they don't want to stay in Maryland because they
Yeah.
say it's too expensive. My money will go so much farther if I'm somewhere else.
Yeah, 100% right. Yes, there's two ends of the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
The educated workforce, younger workforce, and then our senior demographic as well. Those
Mhm.
two people find, and that's really, if you think about it, that's why we had the Starter and Silver Homes Act that we were trying to get through and pass. And that's a prime example of some of the issues that we run into the General Assembly. It didn't pass. And that's such common sense legislation. If you allowed us to build a community that had the infrastructure to support let's say 100 cottage cluster homes, one floor living, kind of some of the things that you saw being built coming out of, World War II in the 50s and 60s, we'd sell out of that community in a weekend, if it was priced right. We just don't have access to that kind of housing anymore. They're also talking about raising the impact fees in Anne Arundel County. We're going to obviously fight hard against that. But those kind of things deter, they'd make it impossible for builders and developers to build smaller affordable homes because the margin's just not there. If you look at a lot and you have $180,000 of permitting impact fees before you even put a shovel in the ground, you got to build a, $800,000 home in order for the margins to work for the builder and the developer to make their money. So that's what we're fighting hard against. We're trying to, at the state level, take some of that draconian zoning and permitting issues back from the counties, which obviously the counties are fighting hard against too. So that there's that sort of infighting going on between the state and counties, and where we're at. But
I have a question on that. I thought I heard something that they were trying to change it instead of being due at the beginning, the impact fees, it wouldn't be due until occupancy permit was issued.
Yeah, and we're hoping we can get that done. Yep, that's a good point, Pam. Yep, we're fighting hard for if they're going to do that, then or put these in the impact fees on the back end of it instead of up front. Yeah, and there should be, we've got to work hard to look into and have the legislators look into public-private partnerships a little bit more. I know, like when I was more involved in doing the trips with like Bob and Pam, I'm sure you're on some of these conferences and trips. Down in Florida, they're doing, in some of the areas, doing a great job on these public-private partnerships where the developer will come in and be required to improve the infrastructure, the traffic flow patterns around a particular development. And it's kind of a win-win for everybody. That's a prime example of, if you smart growth, you can help improve traffic situations. And certainly from an environmental standpoint, like I know that the Route 3, the redevelopment bill that was kind of cut up in the county council, but along Route 3 in front of Fort Meade, that redevelopment would have helped traffic patterns, because I know everyone was flipping out about that. And then also from an environmental standpoint, it would have created greater stormwater management than, all the impervious space that's out there now from when they built in the 50s or whatever, where there was no cause given towards some of the environmental concerns that we have today. So those are the kind of things we need to educate on. I think it was candidate James Kitchens had mentioned Howard County has a citizens advocacy committee where they actually come in and they take key players from the county, just not politicians, business leaders and people that have a voice within the community, and educate them on what the development process looks like, so there's not as much misinformation. Because right now a lot of people are getting their information, obviously we know, from like social media and things like that, where there's a ton of misinformation out there. So we have to guard against that and figure out a way to educate the populace at large. That's one of our biggest challenges, I think. And hopefully we're going to try, and I know Pam, you and I talked about it, we'll have a candidate forum on the state level as well, like we were doing locally. But also my hope and goal with Maryland Realtors, when we have the new CEO take over, I think beginning in July, but do like a housing summit where we can bring together developers and builders, realtors, members of the public, and really talk about in an informed, kind of constructive way, what some of this pro-growth, smart development would look like.
Sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, I think we're going to do it. At least I've been encouraged by what I've been told. So it's good. And I know we're working hard locally on the local level. Like Max is, intricately involved, and obviously right now with the elections coming up, that's sort of our main focus, but we'll get back to that same thing on a local level, hopefully by the end of the year.
Well, thank you very much. I think I know you have a big day. We all have big days, I think, scheduled. Yes. So thanks very much. And look forward to seeing you personally in the very near future.